I'm Jeremy Parish, and this is The Games Behind the Games, where I talk to game developers about the games that influence them. I'm here at WayForward Technologies to talk to Adam Tierney about Delphine's Sega Genesis classic Flashback, and how that's informed his work and philosophy on games like River City Girls. Yeah, so I was a little surprised when you said you were interested in playing Flashback as kind of something that inspired you, because I was thinking something more directly related to River City Girls, you know, like a brawler or something. And I wouldn't say this is the furthest thing from that, but it's pretty far.
Right. Yeah, Flashback for me has always been a very formative game in terms of just how to do design in general and how to do story plus action gameplay and weave it all together in a very kind of cohesive singular experience. For me, it's one of the most clever games in terms of having a wide variety of themes of what you're doing, of what your purpose is of your character, you know, where you're supposed to be going next, but it does it all within the same standard mobility. So, you know, you're not really upgrading what you're doing in terms of abilities, in terms of like guns, in terms of like the way you control the game, but you're going from I'm exploring a jungle to I'm a courier to I'm interviewing people in a bar to I'm in an alien thing till I'm in a game show. Like they're very, very clever about like mixing up the themes of the game, and so that's what always kind of stood out to me for it.
What was your first experience with Flashback?
I was more of a Genesis kid growing up. I didn't have a Super Nintendo until I was an adult. So I think I just played it, just renting it from Blockbuster as a kid, and just really fell in love with it, really just kept playing the hell out of it, bought my own copy as a kid. It taught me kind of how to weave story and gameplay together in a very natural way. And that helped out, you know, most of the games I've done, especially River City Girls, which is the most recent one I directed, very heavy kind of blending between the story elements and the gameplay elements, but always a desire to never have one overtake the other. And so, you know, with River City Girls, it's a lot of passive storytelling. It's a lot of passive VO or implied storytelling, or, you know, just looking at the environment and saying, oh, hey, there's a broken wall. Something must have come through here. And so I think a lot of those sensibilities in me as a director come from this game, just because there was so much environmental storytelling, so much subtle storytelling. You're uncovering the gameplay and you're getting a deeper story and a deeper kind of understanding of the world, but most of the time you're always in control of the main character.
I think was a great creative choice they made, was moving away from the polygonal art of Another World. Like it keeps that kind of fluidity and that style, but there was this sort of abstraction to Another World. You didn't see so much in detail in the environment. You know, it was also a little more abstract, whereas there's just a lot of texture and detail in this environment, all the other environments you see too. It definitely doesn't feel like grand science fiction saga here in the jungle, but then you kind of look and you realize, well, it's jungle, but not really. It's, you know, metallic structures that have been built and just became mossy over time. You start to see this kind of, I guess, visual storytelling unfold just within the environment.
And I think it's very environmental in, you know, so much as like when I jump off of this cliff, you can see like little specks of dirt falling. And, you know, the fact that you've got this door, it's not just locked, but it's clearly broken. It's trying to open repeatedly. It does like the two little plates at the bottom and nothing else. That's a really interesting way for them to tell the player, you have to come back here, you have to find something to make this work. I don't think you'd see that in most games. I think most games would just have it locked and just give you some, you know, glaring error message. But the little touches like that make it more immersive, I think. I love all the little contextual stuff too. So, for example, like if you press your gun button as you're climbing up on a ledge, you'll come up with your gun drawn. So there's just lots of like little tiny little touches like that just make it more immersive than I think like a typical game.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the sort of subtle animation in this game, you kind of see that come through in River City Girls, with like especially the NPCs, the people who are just hanging out in the world, who aren't actually taking part in the brawls. It's just like they find ways to kind of duck and weave out of combat and stay out of harm's way. And it's just little details like that you know, kind of help set the world, I think. It's
all storytelling that doesn't detract from the moment-to-moment gameplay. I mean, we have full animation cinematics in that game, and we've also got kind of WayForward style, Shantae style slide-in portraits. I'm actually very proud, I think more than any other game I've ever worked on, River City Girls is the first one where there's really no scripted sequence with the in-game characters, except for one moment, but it's a gag from Double Dragon 2, so we had to do it. Aside from that, every time you see the sprite characters, you can control them.
Something like a save point?
I want to say it's a hazard.
Oh. Well, that's one thing you don't want to mix up.
Yeah, I don't remember. Let's see.
Oh, bad news. Sorry about that. So there is some trial and error going on.
Absolutely. From where I just died to grabbing the holocube, going through the door again, it's only going to take us like a minute or two. So a lot of stuff that we have to think about now when we're designing games in terms of like auto-saving, in terms of like checkpoints and player progress, probably weren't as much of an issue back here where, I remember definitely for myself, you would play through a game like this pretty much in one sitting. I don't think players inherently hate dying in a game or hate challenge in a game. In fact, I think, if you have a game where it's just, there is not enough challenge and they never get a sense of kind of the risk and death and continuing, if they don't get a little bit of that, they won't have as much of a memorable experience. I think they'll just beat it and never feel a need to pick it up again. So especially with boss battles like in River City, that's a game where it's very heavy on the combat, and we knew that we wanted it to be kind of a tough game. We didn't want players to generally get through the game not dying and having beating every boss on the first chance, because it doesn't match the world. It doesn't match the theme of this kind of world where everybody's beating the crap out of each other. Okay, well, we want the player to get hit. We would like them to occasionally die. How can we make that seem fair? So that's why we did on that game very forgiving checkpoints where every time you enter a room, if you both die, you can restart in one room out. And then also introducing systems that would actually take advantage of that. Like if you're playing in 2-player and your friend dies, their little angel floats away, you can stomp it back into them. So now it's like, you can kind of look forward to these death moments because they create an enhancement of the relationship with the other player. So kind of turning a negative into a positive in a way.
But I'm curious about some of the other games you've worked on through the years. Mm-hmm. Like, how does this translate into those?
The idea of varied gameplay without necessarily having to need drastically different animations or drastically different modes. I remember with the Batman game, we did that a lot, Brave and the Bold on Wii. That was one where the moment to moment is very much like Double Dragon. It's just a brawler platformer, basically. But we wanted to keep it fresh because especially with something like the brawler genre, like on the Batman games and River City Girls, it's very easy for gamers to get burned out and just feel like, okay, I'm doing the same thing over and over. I don't want to do this for 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours. And so we did a lot of kind of like goofy one-offs and visual puns and suddenly you're being chased by this gigantic yarn ball in a yarn factory, things like that. Again, it's like, how can I get new gameplay out of the same kind of assets, out of the same kind of functionality? And then same thing with River City Girls. It's like, that game especially, you're basically just running and punching and beating everybody up. We needed to come up with interesting gameplay, but also not drastically change it to where people feel confused or where it's not building upon what they've already learned up to that point.
So you've worked on games that are more in this genre, like the side-scrolling genre, right?
Yes.
I mean, there's Aliens.
Yes.
Because you do have this sort of rich environment, like a kind of a world that people know, and that I don't know. I'm curious if that's limiting or if it allows you more opportunities to kind of tinker around. And
I think the WayForward methodology and what Matt Bozon really kind of taught me when I first started here as a designer director is you always have to do ultimately what is in best service of the game. Something like Aliens, we were on that game. It was interesting because that's not only a brand, but it's also many different kinds of brands. So which Aliens are we looking at? Or is it all the movies? Is it the previous games? Is it the comic books? Is it the toys? All that kind of stuff. I think whenever we work with a brand, the first thing we do is try and mine it for as much as we can. So there's always an extra level of satisfaction when you find stuff from a movie or from a cartoon that is very gameplay appropriate. With something like River City Girls, I think that's a good example of, we had these 50 games we could mine from, but then, you know, wanting to make something that would feel like a new experience and feel like a WayForward experience. We basically knew from the start we want to come up with a new visual style for this game. So fans of the River City Kunio series know that that's kind of a big deal because they don't do that. Like, they've done 50 games and they still sort of look like the NES game,
right,
out of preference. And so we said, no, we don't want to do that on this time. We want to like come up with a brand new visual style, brand new audio style. It seems to have paid off because people really like it, but you know, in great thanks to Arc System Works, the owner of the brand, because they let us take that step. They let us play with their brand, and they didn't, you know, force us to do exactly, you know, what it already was.
All right, well, Adam, thank you very much for your time. It's
Yeah,
been
absolutely
great chatting with you and seeing a little more of Flashback. I'm glad I'm not the only one who's a little stumped by this game sometimes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.